Has somebody ever made it very clear how they feel about something, or maybe even you, without saying a word? Well, that's because nonverbal communication can be incredibly powerful. So this unit will help us explore nonverbal communication, specifically the elements of nonverbal communication, and also the general principles. Now, these are just rules that we need to understand about nonverbal communication so we can begin to pick it apart and understand it. So the first is that nonverbal communication does convey emotions. Sometimes just the way someone cocks their head to the side. My dog does that. That's how I know that she is confused or inquisitive. Sometimes just the distance between us or facial expressions. All these things can tell people how we are feeling. The second principle is that nonverbal communication is multi-channeled. This means that all of those different elements work in tandem. So you're getting lots of different nonverbal messages all at the same time. It's not just one. The third principle is that nonverbal communication is ambiguous. Sometimes we think we know how somebody feels because of an expression or a movement of their body, but sometimes we don't really have any idea. So it can be ambiguous. You can not really understand what someone is conveying through those nonverbal messages. Number 4 is that those nonverbal communication messages may actually contradict verbal communication. So my mom used to do this to me all the time. She would grit her face and grit her teeth and say, "I'm not mad at you," and that was scary. So I saw that in the recording, frightening. But her voice was saying that she was not angry, but everything else about her was letting me know that she indeed was. So sometimes our verbal messages say one thing, and our nonverbal messages say something else. They can contradict each other. And finally, nonverbal communication is culture-bound. Here in America, if someone isn't looking you in the eye, well, we might see that as a sign of disrespect. But in other cultures, that's actually a sign of respect. You don't look someone, especially an authority figure, in the eye. So whenever you're working with someone, you might just want to take into consideration what culture they are coming from, what their nonverbal communication messages might be, regardless of what they mean to you. So those are just 5 general principles of nonverbal communication. Okay, let's talk about the actual elements of nonverbal communication. And the first is facial expression. Again, sometimes you can just look at someone's face and think you know exactly how they are feeling. We have specific cultural guidelines, specific cultural norms as to how we use facial expression as a group or whenever we're in large groups of people. And those are called display rules. My favorite example of this is watching American Idol. I love that show. That's probably very clear to you by now. But whenever someone is about to get eliminated, or especially in the finale when there's 2 people on the stage and they call the winner's name, look at the loser. And yes, they are a loser. They have lost this competition. But they almost always look just as excited as the person who actually won does, even though they just lost millions of dollars and fame and fortune and everything they fought so hard for. How can they be so happy for someone else? I'm not saying they're not happy, but they're not able to show that genuine sadness or that genuine sense of loss that I think anyone would feel in that situation. You can see that in sporting events and beauty pageants. It's a pretty common phenomenon. We just don't always display how we really feel through our facial expressions. I've always kind of secretly hoped someone would do that in a very national setting, just so I could have a perfect example of what happens when you break display rules, because people would not like them very much at all. Alright, the second element of nonverbal communication is mutual gaze. That's G-A-Z-E. Also called eye contact. Now, obviously, eye contact is something that can have a dramatic effect on someone in a nonverbal communication setting. Sometimes we like people to look at us when we're speaking. If they don't, we take that the wrong way. But gaze also indicates the intensity of one's feeling. If we're on a romantic date and I'm staring into your eyes very deeply, that's probably more meaningful than if I'm at the supermarket and I'm staring at you very long and meaningfully. 2 different situations, but the intensity is still the same. One appropriate, one not so much. So you have to be careful with your eye contact. Too little can be a bad thing. Too much can be a bad thing. It just depends on the situation. The third element of nonverbal communication is body language, which we're going to call kinesics. This refers to the study of communication through body movements, and that can be a lot of different things. Two major parts of that I'll talk to you about. The first is posture. You can see that I didn't even plan to do this, but I am leaning forward. That's something that I was trained to do as a counselor, because when you lean forward, well, you're indicating that you're interested in someone, you're interested in what they have to say, you're open to communication. If I were to just lean back and talk to you like this, maybe that doesn't look like I care so much. Body posture can also indicate status too. If you're in a group of people, maybe a group of friends, maybe even a business meeting, and someone is very relaxed, well, this looks like they're in control, they're in power. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so comfortable to do this. I don't recommend doing this on job interviews or first dates. Again, it gives the impression that you're pretty high up there and you're pretty confident with where you're at. So body posture, again, can communicate a lot of different things. Something else related to kinesics is hand gestures. I'm actually holding my hands together right now because one of many things I got from my mother is that I constantly talk with my hands. Whenever I'm with my friends or when I'm in actual class, I'm always doing things with my hands, and part of it is to keep your attention, but part of it is also because I cannot stop. This is just one way I learned to express myself. So I apologize if that's distracting, but actually some research suggests that, especially for teachers, it helps keep your attention because you can't stop looking at what I am doing. So those are hand gestures, again, a part of kinesics or body language. The next element I want to talk about is touch. I'm not going to talk too much about this one. Touch obviously can convey emotions and convey a message. Sometimes it's romantic, sometimes it's friendly, sometimes it's business. Gender differences occur with touch. Women are more likely to touch each other in terms of intimacy with friends. Men are more likely to touch each other as a kind of a status symbol, maybe in athletics or in business situations. And where men and women touch each other and their opposite gender also depends on some things as well. So make sure you read through all that, make sure you understand all of those guidelines about touch. The final element of nonverbal communication is proxemics. Now, this is the study of interpersonal distance, and there's a whole learning outcome assigned to this one, which I'll tell you about in just a second. Okay, I love talking about proxemics because it's always fascinated me how much space people leave between themselves. As we go through this, make sure you know there are 4 different zones, but they are identified by the actual physical distance between them. I'll tell you some situations and some relationships that usually have specific zones assigned to them, but whenever you're asked on a question, you're given a situation that says, Zach and Slater are this many feet apart from each other and they are best friends, or they are boyfriends, or they don't know each other. It doesn't matter what their relationship is if I'm asking you for the zone. The only thing that matters is the actual physical distance. So make sure you know that. That's a common mistake people make. But I will tell you, some of the relationships and situations that are likely to fall into each of these zones. The first zone I'll talk about is the public distance zone. This is when someone is greater than 12 feet away from you. Kind of the rule of thumb here is if you're in a parking lot deserted at night and someone is more than 12 feet away from you, you probably don't feel that uncomfortable because that's public distance. Them being that far away doesn't mean anything about their interaction with you. If they were to get inside 12 feet, however, that might make you uncomfortable, because 12 feet away is usually where we like to keep strangers or people that we do not know at all. The next zone is social distance. This is between 4 and 12 feet. These are usually people that you know, but you don't really know that well. Usually if you're at a party with people you don't really know so well, maybe a work situation, especially coworkers, you know each other, but not close enough to get in each other's personal space. So social distance is between 4 and 12 feet. Right now, with this recording, I am in the personal distance zone. That's 1.5 to 4 feet. We usually reserve this for people who are close to us, usually close friends, maybe family too. If I were to get closer than 1.5 feet, why not? Let's just do that. This would be intimate space, and this probably makes you very uncomfortable. For one reason, I need to shave, and the other reason is this is not okay for you to be this close to someone that you're not intimate with. So let me back up. Sorry, that was creepy. Intimate distance is the closest zone, obviously. It's from 1.5 feet to actually touching each other, and this is where we usually reserve this space for people who are very close to us, parents, people that you're romantic partners with, people that you're dating, married to, lovers, what have you. And so, again, we usually keep people that we don't have those really intimate connections with out of that space. If someone gets in your intimate space and you don't have that close relationship with them, it can make you very uncomfortable, sometimes to the point of violence or filing a police report. So just make sure that you know your intimate distance zone is the one you reserve for people closest to you. Now again, there's exceptions to these all over the place. If you're in an elevator that's crowded, you're going to be all up in people's intimate distance zones. But hopefully they don't assault you or call the police, because you literally can't be any farther away. That's just the situation presenting itself that way. Maybe you have a best friend who does not like to be touched. Maybe they were abused. So you love them to death, they love you to death, but they want to keep you at a pretty fair distance, and maybe everybody else the same way. There's a couple of types of people that proxemics means absolutely nothing to. Little children don't have any kind of understanding of these distance zones. If they have a certain temperament, they'll walk right up to a stranger and hug them, so it doesn't matter that they don't know them that well. You probably wouldn't do that. You probably shouldn't do that, because again, as adults, most of us have some kind of understanding about proxemics. So make sure you know all 4 of those zones and the measurements associated with them. And again, it's the measurements you use to define them, not the relationships that are usually, but not always, associated with them. And sorry for getting in your intimate space.